ულში გვიცხოვრი ამნეხანს მეგობრებო. ჩვენ რომ გვეგონა ქართველ მორაგბე ჯენტლმენებს რომ მარტონი ვიყავით ამ სამყაროში, თურმე ვწდებოდით. თურმე მსოფლიო სავსეა მორაგბე ჯენტლმენები და სასწრაფოდ გადავწყვიტეთ ეს შეცდომა გამოვასწოროთ, ამიტომ დღევანდელ ჯენტლმენების თამაში დავპატიჟეთ ძალიან საინტერესო ჯენტლმენი. სიამოვნებით წარმოგიდგენთ საქართველოს რაგბის კავშირის სარაგბო დირექტორს რამა ჩანდს. მანამდე ისიც უნდა გაგაფრთხილოთ, რომ რა ვქნა, ჯერჯერობით რამამ ქართული არ იცის, ამიტომ ჩემი ინგლისურით უნდა შევეჭიდო ამ ინტერვიუს და ნახოთ რაღაცა გამოვა. Now let's switch to English. Well, I've seen your interview with Luka. Well, his English is much more sophisticated than mine because he's an intelligent and educated man, and
yes.
My English comes from Beatles songs. But anyway, I'll try to keep up with you, and let's see what happens. First of all, your position at the rugby union is a HP. What?
My role is actually the director of rugby development.
Yeah. Okay.
So I sort of focus on quite a lot of areas of the game in Georgia, and we basically have my role will focus on improving our overall processes, systems, and how all of our programs function.
Okay.
To sort of a better standard.
Okay. As I know, you were born in Fiji.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
You grew up in New Zealand. Mm-hmm. Your name tells me that you have roots somewhere else.
Yes,
so it's
yes.
very fascinating, all your life story. Is it a friendly environment for you, for a New Zealander in Georgia? I was imagining a northern person like Swedish or Norwegian coming here. Too much temper, maybe.
Yeah.
But for you, it must be.
I mean, it's different. Like it's every culture's got its mannerisms.
Yeah.
You know, like how they have conversations, how they deal with conflict, how they come to agreements. And Georgians are no different. You know, obviously a little bit more passion for us. You know, when you hear them talking, you know, a lot more enthusiasm and a lot more voice. Is prominent, probably a little bit different to Australians or New Zealanders.
Okay.
But overall, I think I think the nature of the people is very good and very kind. Yeah.
Okay. Yourself, you from which town?
Me, I'm from Auckland. My family's in Auckland. My mum and dad still live there in our family home there in New Zealand. But for the last 8 years, I've been based in Australia in Brisbane, and my wife is actually a Kiwi who's been living in Australia much longer, which is quite common. A lot of Kiwis move to Australia. There's I think there's over 1 million of them over there, and especially in Queensland where we are from, because it's very warm and hot, and the climate is quite nice, and nice beaches and stuff. So it's a good place. Yeah.
So let's move to Georgia completely, and let's move to the rugby union and Georgian rugby. At your arrival, what was your starting point? What did you discover? What were your expectations, and what was the reality?
Yeah, good question. It's funny when you go into these types of roles, you know, if you're from somewhere else but also the rugby is quite different where you're from to here. You have some preconceived thoughts about the game, and one of those things I thought would be that you know, I knew the game was popular here, and I knew it was going up. Like, I knew it was improving, and obviously we've seen how the national team's been performing even from a distance. We could see this in Aussie, New Zealand, but I didn't realize there would be actually that much talent, to be honest. There's a lot of talent here, especially in the younger age groups. So that sort of 15, 16, 17, 18 space. It's really, really strong, and that surprised me a little bit. I thought like comparatively, some of the players I'm seeing are very good players who could probably do very well in Australia and New Zealand as well if you go like for like, like age for age. So that surprised me.
You think so?
I think so, definitely. In certain positions, definitely. And that was a surprise, and it was a good surprise, by the way.
You mean props?
Props. No, I think props. I think back rowers in particular, and even some of the outside backs. Really, it's really exciting to see. So there's some good athleticism, good physicality. Of course, you would expect that from Georgians, but more importantly, there's some good skills being displayed. They'll need to obviously continue their journey and get good development and nurturing from our staff and development people, but there's a lot of potential there in the youth, which I was surprised with, to be honest. The other thing I suppose surprised me a little bit was how probably a lot of the players in most of the divisions actually paid money. So the club competition you get paid here, and I thought there'd be a lot more amateur rugby as well. But there isn't as big a presence of amateur rugby, so that surprised me too.
As a representative of amateur club for many years, I can proudly say that we are not a lot.
There's not many, right? Yeah. And I think the way the market or the game's going, not just in Georgia, around the world, I think unions have to be really careful in terms of how they plan the growth of their union, because obviously the expectations on salaries and expectations on costs are going up, and if you're not bringing more money back in, then you have this model where you're always at a deficit. And it's not just Georgia. A lot of countries are going through this pain right now, and I think there obviously has to be a place where amateur rugby exists regularly. The social side of the game, needs to be there as well, because I think that's another great way we can capture more fans as well, and people who want to participate in rugby and maybe put their children in rugby and things like this. Yeah.
Before we move to the next next subject, let's clarify your role in rugby union.
My role is mainly to work in the development side of things with the union. So I sort of look after sort of four big sort of pillars, if you could call it. So you sort of have our clubs and competitions. So basically any clubs that are playing in any competition. So such as DDRT, First League, Regional League, Domestic Sevens, etc. Included in that would be amateur rugby as well. Looking after the participation program. So how do we engage new people to the game? How do we keep them interested in the game and retain them? So programs such as festivals, Get Into Rugby are designed for this. Our training and education as well. So I think in Georgia you call it Rugby Education Unit. That's basically how do we make the workforce better. So how do we make our coaches, medics, S&C, referees, everyone at a higher standard. And then the last one is an area which is pretty critical, is how do we move all of those three into the talent pathway. So the talent pathway is where you take certain identified talent and you develop and nurture that talent. So our talent programs would be your men's sevens, your women's sevens, your under 18s, your academy, and then obviously the sort of under 18s academy push on to under 20s, and then obviously black line and national team as well. That's
the HP, the high performance.
Yeah, exactly, the black line and the national team.
That's
exactly.
Okay. If you start ranging the issues, the topics that you plan to accomplish here, you and rugby union together, what do you see as a first step, second step, and third step? There might be many things in the first step, second step, but the primary goal at this moment and the secondary, then so on.
Yep, cool. So when we first came here, one of the first things I had to do was to just see where the union was at in all those areas we just mentioned. So, what's our current situation, current state? That was number one. That took a little bit of time and conversations and observation and talking to people and actually going out to certain clubs and regions and visiting and having conversations. So that was really important, because then you understand more specifically the challenges a little bit better before you start to push the strategy, if that makes sense. That part's important. So we've done a lot of that now, and I think the next part now is the decision-making process in terms of how we want to sort of redefine our domestic competition. And we're going through a little bit of work there right now with the rugby committee and the board and stuff around what are the standards we want set for professional rugby, semi-professional rugby, amateur rugby, and how can we help our clubs achieve that standard? Because one of the gaps I think we'd all agree is that we've got very good talent, but we just need I suppose to really have people around that talent that can help develop them at a better and faster rate. So one of the key roles I feel is that we've got to really uplift our workforce. So uplift our workforce's knowledge, skills, experience, give them opportunities. Would always be the key to success, I think, for any union, not just Georgia. But that was a gap that I noticed when I first came. The other part is making sure that our clubs, our domestic competition clubs, are financially sustainable, and that there's good governance around them. So what we mean by that is that we want our clubs to continue existing for long periods of time, and we need them to exist for our rugby communities. We don't want to see them struggle financially. We don't want to see them have poor leadership, so that they end up failing. We want them to succeed. You know, that's what the union is here for, to try and help our clubs produce talent, but also retain people. So that's probably the second priority, you know, in terms of develop the people, improve the clubs. And the third one is, I think, just be really clear with how we're going to now take our talent forward, because obviously we've got opportunities, as everyone knows, you know, we've got more and more doors starting to open. Obviously EPCR, you know, we've got the Sevens team on the Challenger Series.
But at the same time, we have to push them very hard.
Yeah, exactly.
To open them.
Yeah, that's right. And I know probably everyone in the union and all of the leaders have been doing that for a long time and trying, and finally there's some movement, you know, thankfully, and that's great to see. Like, as an outsider coming in, I feel like I'm part of the in now. I'm really thankful that our talent can compete at the right level that they should. And it'll be challenging, and that's what we want. We want our best players to be challenged all the time. Of course, it's much better than them winning everything. You know, we'd rather they get challenged better. It's better for Georgia's future.
General strategy for running Georgian rugby. Do we have any models around the world? What are the best models at the moment? Where can we learn the best examples of running rugby in a country?
Yep. Yeah. It's well. The thing I will say about Georgia, as someone who's probably worked in a few unions, as an administrator, as a coach, is that the Georgian model is super unique. Like it's very, very unique.
Why?
I've never encountered. Okay, I'll tell you why. I've never encountered a model like it. You know, it's a model where, you know, 80% of your revenue comes from government. Number one, you have a high percentage of professional players and staff, like, meaning that is only their job. You don't have much money coming in through broadcast. You don't have much private sponsorship. Your match day tickets and stuff isn't as high as it could be. So this is obviously how normally the rugby unions build their models, you know, is around match days. They commercialize it as best as possible. So that's number one. So I know that we're working hard on those levers, you know, like, you know, improving our relationship with broadcasters, not just in Georgia, around the region. And so we're working on building relationships with other countries nearby. And you might have seen a bit of that recently in the media. We're working on, obviously, private sponsorship. So how can we get interested sponsors in Georgia interested in investing in the game and in the clubs? Absolutely. And then obviously maximising our match days, you know, now that we've got EPCR games coming, we've got our under-20s performing really well, and they'll probably get some more games next year, hopefully at home. We've obviously got a really, really proud national team, you know, and we want to maximise those events, we call them, you know, like most sporting unions are actually event companies, mate, which is the truth. Like, most of their revenue relies on running the events as successfully as possible. And I think that's that sort of sports model and mindset that we're trying to go towards. Because if you're playing professional sport, which we're in a professional organisation, money does matter, of course, and you need to be able to generate it. Otherwise, you might not be able to keep up with the market. And as you know, some of the other markets are struggling right now in rugby, and the traditional markets who've traditionally been very strong, had good broadcast deals, good fan bases. So both of those things are decreasing, you know. So I think it's a good opportunity for Georgia now. I mean, the Irish model is obviously the one that a lot of people compare what unions can do, and their model is based more around a centralised contracting system with their main clubs. And when I say clubs, we're talking that would be equivalent to our franchise team.
Franchises,
yeah, exactly. So that's obviously on a performance perspective doing really well. And when you perform, you know, obviously you tend to get more commercial interest, you get more fans coming. So it's sort of a double-edged sword. You you can't really have one without the other, you know. So you got to really get the balance.
And we
right.
got one without the other, kind of.
Yeah, kind of, exactly.
So so we have to adapt to the situation and invent something new, or we have to go we have to follow the known path and try to. Yeah, we anyway have to try to attract people to the stadiums and to rugby, but considering our reality, how possible is that?
Yeah, good question.
It's a hard work.
It's a lot of hard work, but I think it's about trying to think differently as well, Nika. Like, I think one of the challenges with some of the conversations I had was that I had a lot of open people who were willing to have a conversation, listen, and act. So there's no use if you listen, but there's no action backed up after it, you know, with anything. So the main thing is we have to think slightly different. But one thing I do know is your ability to capture fans in Georgia is high. It can be high because Georgians, from what I've learnt the last 11 months, are very, very proud national people. So regardless of what sport's doing well, I've just noticed people will just get behind that team. They'll be very proud of whether it's the soccer team or the basketball team or the rugby team or the judo team. They just get behind it.
I think you just need to pull the right triggers.
Exactly. And I think you're absolutely right.
The hard work is to find the right trigger.
Yes, and also to make sure that you've got the structure and the people capability in terms of promotion of the game and how you capture the fans, how you retain the fan, how you keep that fan engaged. And they don't have to be a participant. Like the traditional sports model is, for most countries, is you want participants. Why? Because they become consumers and they're your fans. That's the traditional model.
Yeah.
In Georgia, because our participation numbers are very low, they are overall very low, that's a bit of a challenge. And that's why programs like Get Into Rugby are going to be really important, because they're going to get into households or families that haven't had experience with rugby, and hopefully they can see the value of rugby, enjoy rugby, and then want to go to a game, want to turn up to buy some merchandise, want to turn on rugby TV and watch the games or interviews like this, and have to learn and develop. You know, I think it's going to be a bit of a longer strategy, you know, for Georgia around capturing the fans.
Well, the only thing I can tell you now is to wish you luck on this very hard road, because I've been involved in Georgian rugby for decades, and I know how tough it's going to be. Yeah. I'm trying my best, but you have bigger responsibility because
Have you seen it improve, Nico, in that time, the 10 years?
Absolutely. Absolutely. In my opinion, it should already be better. I don't want to talk too much in view, but Georgian public is linked to the national, nationalism, I would say.
Yes.
It matters if Georgian is performing. They do not yet started loving rugby itself.
Yes.
They love rugby.
I agree, from what I've seen,
They love rugby when it's connected to Georgians.
Yes.
True, I think this should somehow change, in my opinion. I have nothing against Georgians. I support them anywhere, but this should change. The real value is rugby.
Yep.
People should start loving rugby.
Yep.
Do you agree with me?
Yeah, and that's where do they love the game, right? Like for usually in the sort of traditional markets, it's at the club. The club is the community. Yeah. It's actually a rugby hub. So part of that, some of the stuff we spoke about earlier was around how do we make our clubs not just financially stable, better governance, better people, but how do we make them actually the community around it?
Better place to be.
Want to come to the games, want to support the local DDRT teams, the First League teams, want to take their kids and register them for festival rugby. Like this is where the challenge. That's when you start doing that really well, and that is one of our goals, of course. You'll start to, I think, notice that you start to have people who actually love rugby and not just love the national team who's doing very well, which is what we want. But I think what we're trying to say is that to build rugby communities, it requires sort of like a team effort, you know, between the coach, the manager, the club, the union, you know, everyone working together.
The parents that take their children to the clubs. That's
absolutely.
That's very important. I wanted to ask you about Japan.
Yep.
This is the last team at the moment, the recent team that moved from Tier 2 to Tier 1. Except for making good money, what can we learn from them? I
think Japan's probably fortunate, like you said, where they've got the big commercial companies and the broadcast money as well. So that was one of also the reasons why World Rugby obviously wanted to go to that market was the broadcast dollar.
Yeah.
As well as obviously spreading the game to more population, blah, 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 different region. But I think Japan's quite fortunate because their players, their national players get to play week in, week out, train day in, day out with high quality international players and high quality staff, to be honest. So what that means is it's sort of that environmental. So the environment sort of shapes you as a person or as a player. So the higher performing that environment's going to be, you naturally just rise to the tide, you know. So it lifts everyone up. So Japan's probably fortunate that their domestic competition is at a situation where week in, week out, day in, day out, they get to play against obviously former or now even more. Now you're seeing more current All Blacks, current Wallabies, current English players go there. Whereas before it was the older 31, 32, 29-year-old player that would go, but now you're seeing 23, 24, 22-year-olds
They simply
going.
refuse playing for their countries to play in
and
Japan.
and that's what I'm saying. The professionalism of rugby has changed a lot, especially in the last 5 to 6 years, I think. And I think what's happening is the markets, the traditional markets, are struggling to keep up with the dollar or the yen or the euro. You know, so what I would say, what we can learn from them is that they went through a bit of stuff about a decade ago, mate, where they put in some serious planning around systems and processes, which is exactly what we're going through now, and we're trying to. And because, like we said, no one is doubting the talent in Georgia and the potential. No one doubts it. I would never come if that was even a you doubted that. Yeah. So no one doubts that. But it's the systems, the processes, and improving the people that's going to be key. And Japan put a lot of investment in that, I think about a decade or so ago, where they specifically hired certain roles, not just one guy or two guys, but many roles and key positions to set them up, you know, for success. And they had short-term goals, just like Georgia, mate. They had goals of reaching top 8, you know, in the World Cup, and just like Georgia does. Very similar paths. It's just the only big difference is obviously the domestic competition, you know, like they didn't have guys playing against internationals week in, week out, or training with internationals who are current internationals. So Japan has that benefit, you know. And then you add in all the clubs, company teams as well. The company teams, you know, they do it quite well with the Japanese players, actually company employees. They're actually employees, and then the foreigners are the rugby contracted players, and then most of the staff are quite high-level professionals that they bring in. And those staff, part of their role is to develop the next crop of Japanese staff, which is what I really like. And it's the same with Georgia. You know, we've got some really good Georgian staff as well, really capable staff. We just need to get some good guidance around them, or some good leaders around them to really take them to their potential. The big takeaway from Japan is if a union's going to invest money, like I said, I would invest more in the system and the structure, and I'd go hard at that and create a long-term plan on that.
We're definitely going to talk about DDT or whatever it becomes. But before, we have to make a short break.
Okay.
I'm going to introduce you to our little rubric,
okay,
which is called the silly question. We have a special list of silly questions that you get to pick yourself. A little left, you know. In fact, they were all answered. Okay. So there are some left.
Pick one?
Yeah, take one after I will translate for you.
Okay, no problem.
And you got to answer the silly question.
Okay.
Okay.
This is this one?
Yes, show me.
There you go, mate.
Why do you think that they say Gesundheit or bless you when you sneeze, and they don't say anything when you cough?
I don't know. Usually, I don't know. Actually, that's quite a funny one. Usually the person who coughs will say after they cough, excuse me, you know, 'cause especially now with COVID, you know, everyone's bloody so self-conscious that I'm spreading some diseases. I don't know, actually. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, God knows. There were some beliefs in ancient cultures that while you sneeze, the evil ghosts get into your body.
Gets into your body.
Yeah, I've read it some ethnological.
So are you trying to get rid of it by sneezing?
So the others tells you bless you to protect you from that.
Okay.
So I'm not sure.
Interesting.
I couldn't be.
Might need to Google that one. Mate.
yeah. But that's what I read once when I was a student. Coming back to rugby and to Georgian domestic system. All countries, in all rugby countries in the world, except maybe England and France, are based on a franchise system. They are on a club level. They are represented by franchises, not the clubs. Do you think this is the future for Georgian rugby?
The domestic championship or the franchise system, or
the franchise system?
Yeah.
Should we represent it by franchises on the international level or on the club rugby?
Yeah.
Or is it possible to reorganize the DRT in a way that a champion could be a good competitor?
Yeah, really, really good question. Like, I think the typical model, like you're saying, is the franchise model, and I suppose part of the reason countries want to invest in franchises is because of the fact that they get to control the program a bit. They get to have the same staff working with the same players, and usually a high percentage of those players will end up playing international rugby. So that's one of the benefits, is just time and cohesion. Cohesion is that word that I keep using, which is how much time you have together on and off the field and things like this. And Georgia's actually very strong at that. So I think that's another reason why Georgia's quite successful in the national team. And then the obviously other purpose of the franchise is to test the talent. So confirm the talent against better players who normally would be better than the club level. So I think franchises are good, absolutely, if you can get them into reputable competitions.
Absolutely.
And I think now we have that, and I think the purpose of the franchise, obviously, for Georgia starting, and you saw obviously the benefits that it produced, in terms of the recent international results. I think would perhaps not be there if you didn't have that franchise system. It wasn't so much about playing Super Cup. I don't think it's about that. Of course, the players are a little bit better than club level, but it was actually the first point that I said about the time together, the controlling of the program, the controlling of the loads, the controlling of the recovery, the staff working together. I think that was what the key was, to be honest. I think club systems, like you said, England and France, and let's be honest, France is lucky. They've got a few private investors and they've got the sponsorship dollars there to be able to put big bucks in, and you see a lot of these countries now trying to control salary caps because of the fact that people just start overspending, and you don't have enough money coming in through fans or sponsorship or other revenue streams. So club systems can be good. I think Georgia's challenge would be, though, that you'd almost have to get like every single Georgian player to come back, away from France, because then you'd have a super, super strong club competition. Let's be honest. Imagine if every Georgian player right now came back and decided to play DDRT. It'd be outstanding. It'd be a very, very competitive league, But I think there is use, Nico. Sorry, there is use for a country like Georgia to play against different opposition, because the Georgian identity and style of rugby has always been, pretty sort of standard, like in terms of the contact area, the scrum, the maul, and I think now you see the involvement of the kick game, the run, catch, pass, the unstructured stuff, and we're starting to see some exciting players show their skills. So I think you still need them to play against international competition, if that makes sense. So that they are used to different styles and different ways of play. It's a bit of a long answer, but I think the franchise system should absolutely still exist. Yeah.
Okay. And if it exists, where should the Georgian franchise or franchises play?
Yeah, I think that was the thing, with EPCR. Like I think we were all hoping probably for more games out of that as well, right? And I think the EPCR potential, though, is huge, mate. I think the ability to perform there and to continue to grow is going to be really good.
Yeah, absolutely. But what I mean that EPCR is something that you get promoted to when you perform in your league, wherever you are. After you get the right, the chance to play for a European club competition, like Challenge Cup or Heineken Cup. But I mean that domestic. Which would be the perfect for us as a domestic tournament. Yes.
Yeah, and that's the thing right now.
I'm leading you to say you are C, but you are not saying.
No. I mean, see, the reason I'm probably not saying it is ultimately it's out of our control. Like absolutely. What I mean is, we are trying to, of course, open doors, but we're sort of like Georgia has been, and that's why the franchise was good. The franchise got created. You're sort of in a position like Japan previously, where you didn't really have regular franchise rugby. That's why Japanese was lucky, because they had their club competition with the foreigners, etc. Is same with this top 12, bottom 12 world rugby competition. SANZAR and the home nations are the ones really pushing hard on that. Especially Australia and New Zealand, whose market's getting less and less now. So they want to go in a big international competition which can generate revenue. And Georgia, even though we're ranked 11th, who knows where we end up? We might be in the second group. And the reality is that even World Rugby can't control certain aspects around private competitions. So we're ultimately all we can do, I think, now is do what the union's trying to do, is to show the value of Georgia as a country, Tbilisi and other cities around Georgia as rugby places of value for people to come, fans to come, and then show the commercial value too, right? Because as you know, those competitions rely on dollars. Who can bring in the most dollars is usually going to open doors for, which is the truth. And this is professional sport. Yeah. So all we can do, I guess, is to continue to try to build on that.
Okay, let's talk about the Diati now. What's going on there? I know there are some changes. So let's choose the main points and let's talk about them. What are the recent changes that we're going to have from the next season in Diati?
Yeah, the upcoming next season, which is September this year, I don't think you'll see too many changes, because we want to make sure if there is any changes, we're communicating it clearly to our clubs and ahead of time, because as you know, it'll affect things like contracting, it'll affect things like budgets, it'll affect things like staff, how many teams, things like that. So the future, what we'd like to see is, like I said, we want good governance, financial sustainability, and better performance of people around the players at the club. So to do that as well, what we'd like to do is to sort of target the investment a little bit more. So what that means is, if you get X amount of gel coming into your club, we would like to think that if you target it into certain pillars, we could get better outcomes for you, as well as the union, as well as for the player. So that's what I think you'll see, is a bit more targeted spending.
And you think that Georgian Rugby Union should or could indicate that pillars?
Yes, absolutely. No, we have to lead. We have to absolutely lead on this.
And what are these pillars?
Pillars could be things like systems, mate. Could be things like workforce. Could be things like infrastructure and hardware. Could be things like logistics. And then obviously the big one, which is the big pillar of spend right now, is salaries, player salaries in particular. So eventually in the future, I think you're going to have to get control of that sort of a little bit. But for now, I think the big thing we're focusing a little bit more on is those other pillars. So we want our clubs to be more professionalized. Professionalism doesn't mean you get paid. Do you get what I mean? Professionalism is actually a mindset, is a behavior.
It is.
Is a day-to-day practice. That's what professionalism is. I've been in competitions where guys get paid nothing, but yet they have professional habits. So what we're trying to do is, we're very fortunate in Georgia. Like I said, guys are getting paid and clubs are getting paid. So let's get them to the standard of professionalism habits, right? And so I'm not critiquing everyone here. I'm saying some of them do a really good job. It's just, let's just make that the normal now. Normal is we analyze and help our players through these systems. We give them X amount of feedback. We have quality staff who are professionals in S&C and medical care and coaching, technical, tactical, as well as mental and physical reasons. We have the right type of training equipment and hardware around us so our players can engage and get better in that. And logistically, logistics is just covering costs of operations, Do
you think the money that they get is enough for taking care of all of this stuff?
Yeah. Good question. Yeah, I think it's a sticky question.
From one side,
yes.
If I were you, I would say, let them go and look for another sources. Look for new funds.
Yes.
From the other side, I would answer that it's not that easy. Let's say they don't have anything extra.
Like no extra revenue coming in.
Nothing
just
more.
The money from the
Just
union.
the money from the government.
Got it. Government.
Is it enough for what?
I think it's enough. I think there'll have to be a transition year, because remember, when you purchase, or if you purchase certain systems or hardware, you don't necessarily need to keep purchasing it every year. You understand what I mean?
Yeah.
When you get certain coaches to a certain level of qualification and capability,
Yes.
then it's just refining them, not necessarily keep on investing. So I think if you're probably like a smart sort of rugby club or, you know, sort of like a rugby manager or whatever, you're probably already thinking this way.
Yeah.
How can I improve the environment for my club? Because when you have good environments, usually that breeds success. Because ultimately, if you want to win DDRT, it shouldn't just be about buying the best talent.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be about that.
No.
Right now, you're seeing that clubs who have heavy investment from municipality or other areas, some may say they've got a bit of an advantage. Some may say that, but I'm not saying that. But what we ultimately want is we want our coaches to be developing players, not just recruiting players.
Yes.
There's a big difference. Of course, in rugby, you need to be good at both. But ultimately, we want our clubs to have really good coaches who can develop the talent that's in front of them, you know, to be quality players. And I think the money that they probably get right now, it would just mean they'd have to spend a little bit less in certain areas. And one of those areas could be player salaries. I'm not saying it is. Yeah. It could be. You know, your top competition is actually a competition that's quite historical, very proud. But professional rugby, not just in Georgia, guys, I'm being honest, is not for everyone. You understand?
Yeah.
Like, everyone shouldn't have the ambition to try and be a professional club. Why? Because it's very, very risky. There's very high budgets you've got to keep up. Yeah. It's high pressure. It's the likelihood of failure for some is quite high. So all I'm saying is be calculated in your business plan, be calculated in your long-term growth plan, you know, be calculated in your long-term athlete development, and really manage the finances so that your club can exist forever. So it can keep having a good rugby community forever. It can keep servicing the local community to have more fans, have more participants, have more parents, like you said earlier, have more people wanting to invest in the game. You know, like the more people you get interested in the game, remember, it's not just about players. They may want to be a referee or a coach or an investor one day, you know. They may want to be the club president one day. Like, this is what we want. We want successful, healthy clubs. And I think by controlling a little bit of the pillars, I think initially in the short term will help us get that. And like I said, like I say all the time, like, and it's not just here, I'd say it is, professional rugby is pretty tough to keep up with, you know. So not every club should have the ambition to be a professional club. Just if you know this is your level, just do the best at that level. Yeah. That's enough. That's okay, you know. Like, maybe you're a feeder to some other club now, and that's okay. But when I say feed, they've got to feed down too, you know, feed
just
up and feed down.
decide with your level.
Yeah, exactly. And be really clear on the role. It's a bit like players, right? Niko, we say role clarity is number one.
Okay, so to summarize about the DDRT.
Yep.
Reduction of the number of the teams, what interests me, and the number of foreign players.
Yep.
Will it apply this year or it won't?
No, look, I don't think either of those will come into play this season because, like I said, with the turnaround time, now we're in July, you know, and season starts in September, pre-season starts in August. It's too soon. I know we've been talking about this even before I came. I know this was a topic. And I know recently and early this year we had some good meetings around this topic as well. But I think in the future, though, you will see some of those things. I don't know about the reduction in the teams. I think that's ultimately up to the board to make a decision on that. And you got two options, right? You can either reduce teams, and you have a little bit more finance to spend in other areas of the game, or you can keep the same number of teams but try to raise the standard of each of them, like professionalize them more. So it ultimately is up to that, up to the decision makers on that. The rugby committee's obviously put together some notes and suggestions and things on that. But regarding the foreign players, I think again it's a bit like the salary stuff we talked about. We've just got to get a good control of how many players per team should have. You know, we don't want. We want good foreigners to come and add value.
Yes.
If you're going to recruit foreigners, let's bring some good guys and good positions who can teach the next Georgian player in that position who train, like I said, the Japan sort of model, you know, where you have like you have a Damien McKenzie playing with a Japanese incumbent number 10. Like that's a great training partner. You understand? Like that's what we'd ideally like to see. So what we'd like to do is restrict the total number of foreigners in each of the teams. I won't say the numbers. I won't say exactly how many numbers, but it'll be less than what it is now. Obviously, it's open right now, but I think you'll find season after there'll be a number. And I think teams teams need to. That'll push teams in two ways. Number one, it'll absolutely make them invest more in Georgian talent, which a lot of teams do already, but it'll make them have to develop the talent. And number two, it'll make them more selective with which foreigner they decide to bring. Not just 10 foreigners, 8 foreigners. Let's target. Let's get this guy in this position because of these reasons. Like it'll make them more targeted, I think, as well. Okay. So it'll help the clubs, I think.
That's an interesting approach. Yeah. Before starting, we talked about Georgian players and especially young players going abroad, some exchange programs or something like that. You just mentioned and we started.
Yes.
So we didn't finish the
No, we didn't. Yeah.
On which stage of this process are we now?
Yep.
And we also said a couple of words about Georgian players. First, Georgian players going to the Australia and New Zealand.
Yep.
Is there possibility in the nearest future?
Yeah, so let's talk about the first part about one of the strategies we want to do, and one of my sort of goals personally. Just my goal is I got asked this question the other day. Oh, Rama, when you leave, what does good look like for you in Georgia? Like what has Georgia done? I said, look, the number one thing I'd like to see is that the staff and the people are a lot better through the time we spend together. That's number one. So for whatever reason, they have more confidence, more capability and skills, knowledge, experience. So because the reason I say that is they're the ones that are the future of Georgia rugby. Yeah. Not necessarily me. They're the ones who are going to have to lead and make decisions in the future. Yeah. So for us, it's vital that we put the right people in the right positions and get them the experience they need now, number one. Number two, the other thing I said was I'd love to continue to open more doors just through networks and relationships. And one of them you mentioned about Australia and New Zealand. And I think we're doing that already. And there's a couple of guys in the union who are working hard with sort of some of our leaders are working hard on the relationships with countries like England. We've, as you see, we've recently had some good relationships with the RFU, in terms of the under-20s. We had the head of disciplinary come out. We've got a couple of their private schools who are interested in giving young Georgians, students, so not like still in high school, opportunities to go to typical rugby schools and study and get a good education, improve their English, plus get really good quality coaching and quality environment, quality competition at rugby. So we've got some exchanges there, and we're happy to support them because we feel that by having our young Georgian players exposed to different environments is a good thing. Now, some people may say, you're shipping talent away and they may end up playing for England and things. And yes, that's a risk, but I don't think it is in Georgia's case because from what I know is that a lot of the players are very proud countrymen and even some of these boys that got offered, they were really worried about leaving because they want to stay connected to the pathway. And I just said, look, it's going to develop you as a person, number one, and number two, trust me, it'll develop you as a player. And our role is to keep tabs on how you're performing, over there and regular conversations with your coaches, and that's what we will do. And look at it as a way where you get in a really good environment for a couple of years. You probably will end up being a better player over there. When you come back, imagine the value you can add to the system or to your club if you go back to DDRT or if you go to under-20s program or whatever you decide to do. So, we're trying to get... Obviously, we've had a long history with France, of course, and that'll continue, of course, and so we don't want to change that, don't want to stop that, want to keep that going. But I think that other markets, such as England and Ireland even, there's a lot of interest and we're having good discussions with...
Is there an interest from there?
Yeah, absolutely, mate, absolutely. Yeah. The amount of guys that have reached out since I've been here, and maybe it's because I'm a foreigner and the language is easy, they just reach out to me, and maybe I know them too, it helps, but the amount of demand asking for positions of Georgians to come across, really? even in Australasia, so let's talk about Super Rugby. Yes. So we've had a couple of clubs reach out already, and in particular, of course, the first thing they say is, Georgian props and front row is what we're after. It's just this identity thing, and which is cool. But as you know, we've got a really quality group of players in the back row right now. We've got some really good centres and outside backs coming through as well. So. Obviously, those countries are not short of those positions, so I understand why they're looking for front rowers. But we've had conversations. It's just a matter of things like visas, mate. Things like they have foreign player rules as well. Especially competitions like Super Rugby is pretty tight on that. They're very conscious that they don't want to open it up too much because they've got such a big catchment in the Pacific. Yeah. So a lot of the Pacific Islanders, as you know, are probably their first place that they fish at. So they'll sort of fish and capture some of them into the Aussie New Zealand programs, and then from there they can decide Fiji, Samoa, or New Zealand, Australia. So it's a closer market for them to get. So I think that's why you haven't seen many Georgians go that far and that way. But we have had interest absolutely from a couple of clubs.
Someone should break that ice.
So yeah, I know. I'm like you, mate. I'd love to, because I'm obviously you're a big fan of Super Rugby as well, you know, and I can tell, and me obviously having grown up with that, and you know, sort of coached in some of the programs as well. Like I'd love to see a Georgian player.
We had played in Super Rugby, but not in New Zealand or Australia. We had in the Japanese.
Okay, and Sunwolves.
Yes.
Yeah, cool.
But it's not that. We need a player in
we can do it, mate. Like I'll be honest, we can do it. It's just a case of how much. I think it's got to be the value proposition for the player as well. What I found talking to some of the players is, and it's a good thing as well, by the way. Players are very very loyal to Georgia, mate, which is good. Like they're very they'd rather be closer to home, I think, than further away, if that makes sense. You know, some cultures, when you talk about jobs and contracts, they're not as wary of that. But I found most of the players are more, if there was an opportunity in England or France, they'd probably take that first versus you get what I'm trying to say?
Not even that. They prefer France to England because there are lots of Georgians in France.
Correct. Sometimes from a talent management perspective and a fan perspective, like you're saying, it's exciting, and for us we want to see diversity of their playing styles, coaching styles, the positional, but I can see the players' point of view as well. Like they want to feel a little bit more at home. I think this is just the Georgians, and I think it's a good thing, you know. But again, the talent side of me is a bit like, come on, let's get these guys, let's get them trying different environments and things too, you know.
No, so I'm on your side in 100% in this job.
We need to write it in the clause.
We always finish this show with talking about Rugby World Cup 23. Your view, your opinion about your expectations. Well, for a guy who was born in Fiji, then raised in New Zealand, and then spent 8 years or something in Australia, I would also like, who do you support? and then about Georgian chances.
Yeah, cool. It's funny, mate, because because obviously tonight New Zealand plays, the Baby Blacks play our under 20s, and so some of my mates from Aussie hit me up, who are you going for? And I always say, always support your employer, mate. You know, always back your employer. I was just a joke, but no, obviously I'd support Georgia, you know, and it's the same when I was in Australia. You know, you have to be, when I worked for Rugby Australia, and as you know, like it's like they have banter. So even then, they'd asked me, who's supporting Wallabies? I said, mate, I've obviously got to support the Wallabies, because like you got to be proud with who you work for. You know, you have to be absolutely 100% committed to that brand and that team. You know, there's no questions. We've got a few short-term goals, you know, like in the union in terms of our teams, as you know, like obviously top 8 is exciting. We've achieved that for the junior World Cup with under 20s, and Lado and his group of staff have done a great job, you know, and I'm really excited about that program, not just the quality of players coming through, but some of the staff are really good, mate, and they're really young guys that have got a lot of potential, I think. So that's exciting. That's exciting.
I agree.
Including the S&C, including the medical. I'm talking about the whole group. So well done to them. And obviously, I think, you know, the mindset has changed a lot, where it's not about competing in these things, it's about winning. And I really like that. Obviously from the big World Cup, you know, obviously I know some people are saying, Georgia top 8 by 2027, but I know that Levan and the guys are super focused on trying to achieve that this year. It'll be obviously outstanding if they do. There's a tough pool, a really competitive pool, very evenly matched, by the way, I think. I don't think you'll see anyone jump up massively ahead of anyone. Yeah. I think a lot of the games will be close, so it could come down to just who manages the performance on game day the best. So obviously top 8 in the short-term future for our Lellos would be great. And then from a sevens perspective, you know, I know the last 2 tournaments probably haven't gone as good as we would like, but from a KPI perspective, they qualified for Challenger Series. You know, they finished second at Rugby Europe in Algarves. They finished as the top 2 non-World Series regular teams. So you would say that's a tick. The only thing I'd say with the sevens is we've still got to make sure that the program is developing people, so developing players. So we've got to make sure the environment is there to keep developing the professional player for Georgia. It's not just about the series, and it's not just about that. So we want to keep seeing that development of those players coming through.
Yeah.
So that's really important. That's really important for us. And a lot of unions use sevens as a way to do that, is to develop their future sort of players. So for us, it's got to be going in the right direction. And a domestic competition, mate, like, you know, we want our clubs to be sort of what they call like fully structured clubs. So clubs who have a lot of depth, all of the age groups, lots of good coaches around them and supporting them. I know I've gone off topic here a little bit, but those are sort of the big four focus areas in terms of sort of the teams and the big rocks, I call them. And I think for me, for when it comes to supporting, obviously, like I said, I'll support Georgia, of course. You know, I always like to support the underdog anyway. Like I'm just that type.
Me too. I like.
Yeah, I'm just that. It's just something about sport. But the beauty is now I don't think Georgia in certain games should feel like they're the underdog, which is exciting. You should feel like, yeah, we're going into this game and we're going to win this. We're favourites. You know, let's take it to the opposition, and I really like that mindset. For me, I think mindset is everything, mate. Mindset first.
Thank you, Rama, for this wonderful conversation. I told you I have plenty more questions left, but let's keep it for the next time.
Okay, cool.
We're definitely gonna meet more and talk rugby, because there's nothing else here to talk about. Thank you once again for your time, for your view, for your excitement, and for serving Georgian rugby so well and so deeply. Thank you, and good luck.
Yeah, thank you, Nika. Thank you for having me on as well. And I've seen your shows, and unfortunately my Georgian is still pretty. It's okay. I'm improving. You know, sutta Charlie Chub. But. Yeah, it looks fantastic, mate, what you're doing to promote the game and hopefully keep growing this platform for you would be great as well, mate. Thank you for your service.
Only with your help and with other guys who are involved in this, it's possible.
Cool.
Thank you,
Nika. დიდი მადლობა.
თქვენს მადლობა, ბატონებო და ქალბატონებო, ვიც აქამდე გვიყურეთ, დარწმუნდით ალბათ, რომ ეს ადამიანი მართლაც ძალიან ღრმად არის ჩართული ქართულ რაგბიში, ბევრ საქმეს აკეთებს სასარგებლოს ჩვენი რაგბისთვის და იდეებიც და გეგმებიც უამრავი აქვს. უღრმესი მადლობა. შეგახსენებთ, რომ რაგბის კავშირის სარაგბო დირექტორი რამა ჩანდი იყო ჩვენთან სტუმრად. კარგად ბრძანდებოდეთ.